What's going on, everybody? This is Neil Drake here, and I want to do a very quick video on how to read the windy widget that is built into our website. So if you go to letsgopolar.com, you will see that there is a Drake Passage Live tab, and it'll bring you to this page. And here what we have is we have built the Windy app directly into our website so that wherever you are, at your desk, at home, sitting on the couch, you can just open the website and you can have a look and see what is going on inside the Drake Passage. And while you're here, you can look at the weather conditions in Antarctica. You can look at the Southern Ocean and the Scotia Sea. You can take a look at what's going on in South Georgia. If we come over here, we see South Georgia. And we have the Falkland Islands. And we're back to Ushuaia, Punta Arenas. Your trip might be leaving from one. So when we open up the app, it should default to the Drake Passage. And if not, it's very easy to scroll around and find it, but it should default right here. And when we open up the widget, it's going to default to the wind setting. If you look at the top right corner, we have our wind, and then we have all these other parameters, and we're going to take a look at those in just a minute and see what those all can tell us. But the first thing we're going to see when we open it up is we're here in the Drake Passage. We have the wind automatically selected, and then we're going to see all of these colors. What do these colors mean? Most people ask. Well, they are indicative of what the conditions are in that zone. So if we move this little flag around, you can drag this flag around and it'll show you that here in Ushuaia itself, we only have 1 knot of wind. 1 knot is pretty much 1 mile per hour. It's close to 1-to-1. It's close enough that you can consider it 1-to-1. And then as we move around, we get into this light blue, that's 7 knots. Then we've got 18 knots here in the green. The yellow is 23 knots. And as we get into these deep pinks and purples, we have obviously more wind, 31 knots. Now, if we look around, we don't have anything severe, but if we go into the future, you can find some spots here. I wanted to show you that, right? That's the worst. Now we're looking at 43 knots of wind, and it gets worse than that sometimes. But if you see those deep pinks, purples, and maroons, like we're in trouble, right? Okay, so like if we look at this, well, what does this all mean? What does a Drake Passage usually look like when we're crossing it? And if I'm being completely honest, this looks like a totally normal Drake Passage crossing. We're leaving Ushuaia. We're going to be in, 20 or so knots of wind. Yep, 20 or so knots of wind. It gets a little bit worse. But all of this is pretty standard for a Drake crossing. I wouldn't be worried about crossing this at all from a safety standpoint. If you're coming back in these conditions, you're going to have some wind to be dealing with, but we're not seeing these deep purples in here. So here's what's interesting, and here's what's fun about this is that when you leave Ushuaia, like let's say you were leaving during this day, you're going to be leaving at roughly 7 o'clock at night, 6 o'clock at night. You're going to head out into the Beagle Channel, and that takes a few hours to go through the Beagle. And it's right around like midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., depending on the pilot and stuff in the Beagle Channel. You're going to start entering the mouth of the Beagle, heading into the Drake Passage. So your first night, you're sleeping, you're in pretty cozy, calm seas. You're here when you wake up. You're about over here. Now, as the day progresses, if we go down here to the bottom, there's a bar here and we can actually see the future. And if you look at it, these are the forecast. So for this crossing, the Drake is actually improving as we go from that Thursday. Now we're in Friday and our ship is down this way. And we've got a smooth Drake the whole way down when we're looking at the wind conditions. So for me, this is a great Drake. Everyone should be super excited. I would go as far as say maybe it's a Drake Lake. We got to look at the swells first, but this is pretty good from a wind standpoint. Now, when we look at the crossings, this is the Drake Passage. Then you've got the Southern Ocean and the Scotia Sea. These crossings between Antarctica and South Georgia, look at this. This is worse than the Drake Passage is. And a lot of people think that the Drake Passage is actually the scariest of the bunch because it's infamous. But the crossing, if you're on a South Georgia itinerary, you do need to be concerned about seasickness because you have to cross this. And this is a 2-day crossing. This is a 3 or 4-day crossing. Depends if you stop over here in Elephant Island. And then you got another 3.5 day crossing to get from South Georgia to Stanley. And then you got 1 day from Stanley to Ushuaia or to the tip of South America if you're going to go to Punta Arenas maybe, to Puerto Madryn. So if you are on one of these itineraries, it's really important to look at all the weather conditions across. Now, while we're here, we could also look at the conditions down in Antarctica. And if you're looking at it and you're saying, oh man, there's all this weather out here. Whew. Here's the best part about Antarctica. You could look at weather that's ripping on the peninsula, and you could have all this rough wind out here. And there are all these beautiful coves and little bays that we can tuck in. You've got, your expedition leader, your captain, your guides, they're always working together, right? Like you got all this wind ripping through these straits here, but all these landing sites in here, all these Zodiac cruises, all of this is all totally fine. You got Nico Harbor, all these areas here, totally visitable and will not impact your trip at all. And if these were the days that we were going to Antarctica, you can expect to have like full days of landings every day. This all looks awesome. Even though you got all this weather on the outside right here on this Friday evening, you've got all these places that you can land. Now, there's some other things that we do look at. The next one we look at is wind gusts. And we don't look at gusts so much for the Drake Passage because it's sort of irrelevant, I would say. We look at gusts more when we're looking at our landing opportunities in the peninsula. And if you look here, the difference between wind and wind gusts, we go off of wind gusts because we want to prepare for the absolute worst scenario. So we want to look at wind gusts. But even so, we've got the straits here are carrying all this wind through, but like you're going to find protection because of the mountains and stuff. All of this is all great for landings and Zodiac cruises. You'd be surprised how well your expedition leaders can find you weather. And sometimes, like, if this were the forecast for like 5 days straight, I might move the ship around here to the corner. Like we might come around to the Antarctic Sound area, start looking at some other places like Brown Bluff and Paulette Island. These are all great. These are all really in the lee of the weather. So one other thing that we look at when we're here is we look at swell. So if we come down here, we've got our weather radar satellite. None of this is really all that important. Rain and thunder you can look at. You can expect to see, there's going to be snow because it's we're obviously the winter in Antarctica. This reliable enough, but I don't really look too much at it. But if we've got all this stuff here, we start looking at wind gusts. We've got our waves. Waves are what is also something that we really take into consideration when we're looking at the Drake Passage. And right now, this is 3 meter waves. This is really, 5-6 meter waves. This is really not that bad. I'd say get ready for a really rough crossing, but I think if we look at this is where we start to see 17-foot waves. Then we're, they're having conversations, but I don't think you're going to be canceling a Drake Passage because what's more important is the period as well. So we're looking at 8-second period, 7-second, 10 feet at 7 seconds. Like that's it's going to be rocky, right? If you had 10 feet at 20 seconds, you won't even know the swells are in the water. So we're looking at the forecast and we're seeing that it comes down to like, this is a Drake Lake right here. We're looking at a Drake Lake, 5 feet at 7 seconds. You're laughing the whole way through. You're at the bar, you're having drinks. Here, if we've got that wind coming up with the swell here, like you're going to have a Drake shake for their first night. If you're leaving Antarctica heading north, you're in a Drake shake. This is when we start to worry. If we start seeing these 20, 22-foot waves, this is when we start having conversations about whether or not we're going to start crossing. And it's not necessarily only the swell or only the wind. It's a combination of the two, and it depends on the vessel that you're on. That's also a big factor as well. But when we start seeing these 22-foot swells, then we start talking. That's 7.5 meters. So some ships will cross in 10 meters, like it's no big deal. But these are what we start looking for, and this is how you can start preparing yourself. If you're looking at the Drake Passage conditions, you're going to look at the wind, then you're going to look at the swell, which is under waves. Now, if you wanted to, you could click this little down button here, and this is going to give you an overall picture for the forecast. It's going to give you the time of the day. It's going to tell you what the wind is doing and the wind direction, and it'll show you the wind gusts all in one. And then to get out of this, all you do is just click back up at this corner here. But that's pretty much it. And it's pretty intuitive, I think. And you would think red bad. But when you see this, I think that this is a totally normal, very crossable Drake Passage, and it's just going to be a little rough. But like I said, if you're leaving, you're leaving and you're sailing into a good Drake Passage. One thing I will mention is that this is not reliable for more than like 72 hours out. If your trip is in a week and a half, 10 days out, and you're sitting here and you think you're going to have the roughest Drake Passage in the world and you're considering canceling your trip, it's not going to be the same in 10 days. This is a very unreliable forecast with anywhere outside of 72 hours. Even in 72 hours, it's very changeable, but it should give you a general idea like a day or two before you're sailing. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot us an email. It's info@thedrakeshake.com. And I'm going to post this in the Facebook groups, and it's going to be living actually right here under the website. So thanks for tuning in. I hope this explained it for you, and I look forward to your questions. This is Neil Drake, and that was The Shake, I guess. Thanks, guys.